Yo, what's up, my metalheads? Keeping it metal, keeping it brutal. We're talking about new metal. Why did people like it? Why did people hate it? I think the reason why people hate it because it was sugar coated, it was on the radio, and they called it new metal, and they said it was heavy, and they said it was aggressive, and everybody from your soccer mom to your old ass grandma would turn on the rock channel and be like, Pantera, nah, that's not real good. Trapped, and they'd go, yeah, or they would hear like Flaw or bands such as Limp Bizkit, and they would really get into it because it had a hip-hop edge to it, it had an electronic edge to it, it was still had that heavy guitar riff behind it, but it wasn't so heavy and it wasn't so aggressive like a Cannibal Corpse or a Dying Fetus that the average person could sit there and listen to it and rock out, and they were like, yeah, I'm still getting that heavy aggressive groove from these bands that were in the new metal genre. And one of the biggest bands that came out of there was Disturbed, and was System of a Down. System of a Down is really that new metal sound, that new metal heaviness. It's heavy, low down-tuned guitars with no breakdowns and no solos. And what you notice with all these bands that are still around that are from the new metal genre, they're adding solos, they're adding breakdowns, they're adding different elements to steer away from the new metal genre. This is the kind of thing happens every 10 years in metal music. You had, at the end of the 70s, early 80s, you had punk. The beginning of the 80s to the early 90s you had thrash metal, and then in the early 90s to the late 90s you had grunge, and then when Korn came around you had that new metal sound. And new metal to me is one of the most influential genres for myself. It's what really got me into what I know now as heavy and aggressive music. I don't really call it metal, I don't really call it rock, I call it heavy ass music because I listen to all genres of metal. And if it wasn't for my youth growing up in the early 2000s, I probably would only be listening to like Metallica, Slayer, Pantera, and the older style of music. But when the early 2000s came around and I first heard Disturbed for the first time, I heard bands such as System of a Down and also Mudvayne. Mudvayne was one of my favorite bands in the early 2000s. They were so heavy, it was ridiculous. And I thought there was nothing heavier than this kind of music, but that was considered new metal because it was heavy, aggressive, with no solos, and it was accessible to radio. Because if you come back today, you're not hearing Slayer on the radio, and you're not hearing Killswitch Engage or Dying Fetus. You will never hear Cannibal Corpse, Dying Fetus, Lamb of God on the radio because that's not radio friendly. But if you put on a Disturbed song, that is radio friendly. You put on a Five Finger Death Punch song, that is radio friendly because the average person can sit there and listen to it and say, well, it's heavy, it's aggressive, and it has a little bit of balls behind it. And the average person can get behind that. The average person cannot get behind a Cannibal Corpse song because the vocals and the riffs are so heavy and so fast, the average mainstream person doesn't get it and doesn't want to hear it. That's why MTV, radio, and all those outlets back in the day, Yahoo Music, MP3.com, they were always bumping these new metal bands because they were giving the fans a little bit of an edge to what was out there. And in the early 2000s it was boy bands like Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, 98 Degrees. Those are the bands that were very popular, and these are the bands that are coming out saying basically F you pop music, we're heavy, we're aggressive, and we're gonna keep playing music that has balls behind it. Not a lot of those bands are around today. They were like the flavor of the week, one hit wonders. The only bands I know that are still around from the new metal genre is Disturbed and System of a Down. Godsmack I would classify in that genre, and Slipknot. Those are the 3 or 4 bands that are actually still around to this day that were kicking ass in the early 2000s. So let me know, were you ever a fan of new metal? And if you were, what was your favorite new metal band? Why or why not? Thanks for watching, and remember to keep it metal and always keep it brutal.